All right. So, in order to factor completely, right, we have a few basic steps that we need to follow. In order to factor something like this, 8x cubed minus 16x to the 4 y squared plus 24x to the 7y, we have to first find the GCF. So if I was looking at this problem, I would have to say, okay, so there is a coefficient, there is an x term that is shared by all three of these terms here, but there is no y. So I'm going to tell you right away that we have a coefficient. We also have an x but no y term for our GCF because it doesn't share, it's not shared between all three. So the coefficient that we have depends on all three of these coefficients, the 8, the 16, and the 24. So we need to find a number that divides all three. In this case, when you sit down and work it out, you end up and find that it is 8. Now, the next thing that we have to do is we have to look at all of the x terms of each of these variables. Now, the x terms all have the power of 3. Now, the easiest way to do this is to say, okay, I know that all of them have an x, so I just have to use the number that has the lowest power. In this case, it's x to the 3. So the GCF in this case is 3. So now what we can do is we can write the GCF of this problem. And the GCF in this case is 8x cubed. So we've got that. So boom. Now, the second rule that we have to follow is we have to take a look at the GCF and put it in the front of our work. So in this case, we're going to have 8x cubed in the front of an empty bracket. And we're going to imagine that our empty bracket is kind of like a garbage collector. Because what our garbage collector does is it goes and says, okay, take away all the stuff that's in that original equation that we have here. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide each of the terms by our 8x cubed. So now all we have to do, just like before, is look at the coefficients, divide them out. So in this case, we have 8 divided by 8 is, well, it's just 1, isn't it? 1. And x cubed divided by x cubed cancels out, which is 1 over 1, which is nothing. We don't have to put anything there for the x cubed part. So now let's go and look at the next problem here, the 16. Now, the first thing that you have to remember is that you always keep the signs that you have between each of these three terms. So now we're going to go and take 16 and divide it by 8. 16 divided by 8 gives us 2. And we have an x to the 4 divided by x to the 3. And the key is to look at the exponents. So we say, okay, there are 4 x's and there are 3 x's, right? So that means we have only x to the power of 1 because we have 4 minus 3 gives us 1. So remember, we can always, when we're simplifying the x powers, we always just subtract the exponents. Now, if you don't remember that, just remember, look at the top one and say, okay, there are 4, and we're going to subtract 3, so we're left with 1, and we just write x to the 1 or x to the 2 or whatever. And the last thing that we have in our calculation, so remember, we were dividing out 8x cubed, but there's no y's, so all we have to do is just bring down that y. So we have y squared. And now we do this again. 24 divided by 8 is going to give us, you guessed it, bring down the plus sign, and 3. And then x to the 7 divided by x cubed is x to the 4 and then y. and we're done. That is it. Now, the one thing that I want you to remember is this. Note that what we have here in the brackets has the same number of terms. As original, as what we see in the original. So if you think about it, right? When you look at this original one, there's 1, 2, 3 terms. 8x cubed minus 16x squared and plus 24x to the 7y. Now, that ensures that when we go and do our GCF factoring, we end up with 3 terms in the brackets. If you only have 2, then you know you've got something wrong. So if they don't match with the same number of terms, then guess what? You've done something wrong. So now, that last bit was the third problem when we divided the original and put it into the second bracket. So now what I want you to do is we're going to go through and do each of these 3 examples. All right, so now if I have 9x squared, it says we have to go and find the GCF of 9x squared, 6x, and 3. So I'm going to look at the coefficients, the 9, the 6, and the 3 first of all, and I'm going to divide those out. So I find out that 9x squared minus 6x plus 3 has a coefficient of 9 that I can pull out. But when I go and look at these 3 terms, you'll notice that not all of them have an x. So there's no x term in my GCF. So I now can make a bracket, and then I can imagine that I'm dividing all of those terms by the number 3. So 9x squared divided by 3 is just 9 divided by 3 gives us 3, and then we just have x squared and bring that down. We have negative. We bring down the minus sign, and then we say 6 divided by 3 gives us 2, and then we just bring down the x. And now we have 3. We bring down the plus sign, and then we go 3 divided by 3 gives us 1, and we're done. Now let's move on to the next problem here. So this next problem is 12x cubed plus 6x squared plus 24x. So the first thing we have to do is we have to look at all 3 of these, and we're first going to look at the coefficients of 12, 6, and 24. Okay, so that's how we do this. We look at our GCFs first. So the coefficients all share the common factor of 6, because each one of these can be divided by 6. Because 12 can be divided by 6, 6 can be divided by 6, and 24 can be divided by 6. Now we have to look at each of the terms variables. So you'll notice that there are 3 variables: x cubed, x squared, and x. Now in this case, you look at all 3 and you notice x cubed is the highest, x squared is the second highest, and x has nothing on it. But really, we could imagine it as x to the 1. So guess what? X to the 1, or x, is our final answer. So is our lowest power, and that's what we use. So now we have x. So now in our bracket, we're going to divide everything by 6x. So we have to take our 12x cubed, and we're going to divide it by 6x. So start with 12 and 6. 12 divided by 6 gives us 2. And then we have an x involved in this. Now, ready? Let's look at it. We have 3 x's So this is x cubed means there's 3 x's, right? And we're going to divide out one of them. So we're left with only 2 x's. So this is 2x squared. Now we bring down the minus sign, and now we go, okay, 6 divided by 6 is 1. All right, and now we have x squared, which means there are 2 of them, and we're subtracting 1x, which means we're going to have x left. Okay, let's do this one more time. So 24x to the 1 is the same as 6x to the 1, and we're going to divide those out. So 24 divided by 6 is plus 4, and x divided by x is 1, so that's gone, so all we're left is that, and we are done. We are literally done. Now, and there is our answer. So our factored form is 6x bracket 2x squared minus 1x plus 4. All right. So now let's do another problem that you will see when you do your homework. All right. So now you have 14 a squared b squared minus 12 b squared c squared. So remember, we have to find a GCF. So remember, our GCFs have to have something that is in each one of these two terms. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the 14 and the 21, the coefficients, right? So we have to find a number that divides both 14 and 21. So 14 and 21 are both divisible by 7, okay? Now, the next thing that we have to do is we have to look to see if both of these equations, if both of these terms have an a. So notice there's an a squared here, but there's no a squared here. So that a squared term will not be in the GCF. So we can't use that. But when we look at the b squared term in here, you'll notice that there's another b squared or another b value in the next term, right? Because both of them share b's, we're going to use that in our GCF. In this case, it's b. Now we look for the lowest power of b between these two. We got b squared and b squared. Well, guess what? That means our GCF will have a b squared term in it. So now all we have to do is take that 7b squared and divide it into each of these things here, okay? Now that I've done that, we got to take our 14. So we look at our first term, and we say 14 divided by 7 gives us 2. All right? And now there is no, so we look at the a squared, and we're going to divide by, we're looking at the a squared now in our term, and we're going to say, all right, now we got to divide out, oh boy, guess what? A squared divided by nothing is just, well, it's just still a squared, so we don't do anything. We leave it in there. So we got a squared. And now we're going to take a look at the minus 21b squared minus c squared after we do this part here. So you'll notice, right, that we have b squared divided by b squared, which is 1, so it's nothing. We don't write anything, and we move on to our next problem. And so now our next term is this, minus 21b squared c squared. So you'll notice we have minus 21. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to bring down the minus sign. And then we look at 21 and we divide by 7. 21 divided by 7 gives us 3. And so there is no b. Oh, we have b squared. So now b squared divided by b squared is nothing. So we don't worry about that. Now, the c squared, there's nothing that is coming out of this that will cancel this c squared. So all we do is just bring it down. So we're left with 3c squared, and we are done. Okay. And we're done. So now this next problem is a little tricky. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause the video, try to find the greatest common factor, and then I'll show you what it is, and then we'll do the next bit. So the greatest common factor of this problem is, well, each of these numbers have a coefficient, each of these terms have a coefficient of 25, -15, and 5. So the only thing that divides all three of those coefficients is 5. Now, each of the terms have an m and an n. So guess what? There's going to be an m power and an n power. All right, so for the m's, we're going to look through and we're going to find the lowest powered m. Oh, there's only one, and it's just m. All right, so nothing to change there for this one. Okay, so now we're going to look at all the n's that are in each of the terms. So the lowest powered n, so there's the lowest one. Oh, that's a higher one, and that's a higher one. So there is our candidate. So the lowest powered m is m to the 1, right? So we don't really have to do anything with it. So now we go and set up our bracket. So here's what I want you to do. Pause the video and do the division and tell me what you get inside this bracket. Okay, so you've unpaused. So just imagine that you're dividing 25 blah, 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 all the way to the end, divided by 5mn. And this is what you're going to get. You're going to get 5m squared minus 3mn, and then plus 1n cubed. Now, the last problem here on the last term here comes out to not have an m because there's an m here. M divided by m is 1, isn't it? So we're done. That's what actually happened. And the same can be said for the first term. You notice I have an n here and an n. N divided by n is 1. So guess what? It doesn't show up on our first term in our bracket. And we're done. Now, once you've copied that down, move on to the next question. So now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to make sure that you take down a copy of this problem. This problem says the area of a rectangle is 25, blah, 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 x to the 4, y to the 5, y squared minus 15xy, right? If I tell you that the length L is 5xy, what's the width? All right, so I know the following. You know that the area of anything is length times width, right? That's true, isn't it? So technically, what we're looking to do is we're looking to take, you could say that the area is, well, the length is 5xy. So we could change this to 5. We could change the L to 5xy, right? But we have to times it by W. And W could literally be the bracket based on the GCF and factoring of our original equation here. So let's go through it and see if we can figure this out. So you know that we have 25 x to the 4 y squared minus 15 x squared y is equal to, well, you know that it's equal to length times width. And we just said here that we have a length of 5xy. So I could write 5xy, and then we put a bracket here. So we got to figure out what this times this is given by this. And the only way that will work is if I take my time and I divide this original equation, 25x to the 4 y squared by 5xy. And we see what we get inside the bracket. So, ready? 25 divided by 5 gives us 5. And then we have each of these terms has, so we have x to the 4 divided by x. So that gives us x cubed. Y squared divided by y gives us y to the 1, which is just y. Then we have, now, bring down the minus sign. So we have 15 and 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3. And then we have x squared divided by x gives us x. And we have y divided by y, which is 1, which is nothing. So, oh my goodness. Didn't we say that this was the length? So that means this part here must be the width. So then you'd say, therefore, the width is 5x cubed y minus 3x. And we're done. And now you're ready to do your homework. So please do the work that I've posted for you. I'll make sure that this video is up for you so you can practice. Bye-bye.